Now available in paperback and e-readers, Spellbound, A Darker Shade of Black. Get your copy today at your favorite online bookseller. A couple of years ago, I wrote a classic blog telling brothers not to allow themselves to be a Pullman Porter in a relationship. And I'm going to leave a link to that classic blog in the description box. Now, in that classic blog, I was comparing black men of today to Pullman Porters because, well, as it relates to relationships, most black men oftentimes wind up putting up with things just like their ancestors used to. Now, back in the days of Jim Crow, oftentimes those who did not have the money to have a black-owned business wound up having to take jobs. And the only jobs that were available were low-level labor like janitor, and one of the highest positions was called the Pullman Porter. And the Pullman Porter worked for the Pullman Railroad Company, and he was literally a maid on these Pullman sleeping cars. He would serve all these white people, and he would literally have to place himself in a submissive position on these trains. And when he was on these trains, he was called a boy, he was called an N-word, people mocked him, people laughed at him, and he had to do this because this was the only job he could get and the only way he could work to take care of himself in Jim Crow America. The Pullman Porter was a job where a man had to literally swallow his pride in order to make a living, and many black men swallowed their pride in order to make a living. And as they swallowed their pride to make a living, they wound up having a middle-class lifestyle. And then when they had their middle-class lifestyle, they were able to buy brownstones in places like Harlem's Sugar Hill and many other areas across the country. And as they went home from their jobs, when they did get those opportunities to go home, usually they found themselves having a relationship with a very supportive black female. And the reason why those black women were so supportive of their black men is because they understood what that black man had to put up with in order for them to have that middle class lifestyle. He had to travel the rails all across the country, being put in this degrading position, being called boy by white men and white women, being mocked by white men and white women, being treated like less than by foreigners who came all the way across the country, and being put down as the bottom of society. In order to build his community up so that they could have that middle class lifestyle, the black man had to put up with a lot of stuff when he was a Pullman Porter. He had to tolerate all sorts of verbal abuse and in some cases physical abuse, and he was always afraid that he would be fired if he offended the wrong white man or the wrong white foreign man or the wrong white woman. That was always led to this black man being anxious and tense on this job. Now, most black women, again, back then understood what type of racism this man had to deal with when he was on that job as a Pullman Porter. And that's why they made efforts to support that man, because they understood that man was going through so much to sacrifice so that they could have the better life in the neighborhoods they lived in. Now, when it comes down to this Pullman Porter, he was our grandfathers and our great-grandfathers, and they laid a great foundation for what our families were supposed to be and a model for what our families were supposed to be. However, when it comes down to your black woman these days, she has imbibed the false teachings of feminism. And they believe that because the white feminists told them that they could be a woman first and black second, they could do whatever they wanted to this black man. And that's how your black man, they see them, just like the racists on those Pullman trains saw black men. And I say to the black man, you should not have to put up with the abuses that your grandfathers and great-grandfathers had to put up with from black women. You should not have to be the Pullman Porter in the relationship. You should not have to sit there and be treated like a child. You should not be talked down to in the same paternalistic way that those white men and those white women and those foreign people talked down to the black men who worked on those trains. You should not have to tolerate that same abuse from the black woman who was supposed to be your partner and your helpmeet in your relationship. You should not have to put yourself in a lower position because the women of the days of Jim Crow did not put black men of their days in a lower position. In fact, they treated those black men with great respect because they understood the sacrifices that those men made in order to give them a middle class lifestyle and to give them opportunities at getting an education or moving their children forward. So those women understood this. Unfortunately, the black women of today don't understand this, and that's why they act and behave in the same way that these white supremacists and these racists act, and they treat black men in the same way that white supremacists and racists treated black men in the past. And I say to black men, you should have a standard for yourself and say to yourself, I deserve better than being treated like my grandfather and my father. I need to establish a standard for myself because I don't need to be the Pullman Porter in a relationship. I don't need to experience the same sort of abuse that those men had from my own women. And I don't need to have to deal with this type of abuse from someone who's supposed to be, again, my wife or my girlfriend, and that I should not be a Pullman Porter in a relationship having to put up with this female's emotional abuse, her verbal abuse, or being forced to serve her like some sort of maid or butler. In a relationship today, a black man deserves to be treated with the same respect that this woman would give any other man, and no man, black man, should have to put up with being the Pullman Porter in a relationship, having to deal with all those abuses because our fathers and our grandfathers and our great-grandfathers marched and protested so that we could be equal in society and receive the equal respect that they got. And if we can't get that respect that they got back in the day when we had a black family, then why should a black man have a relationship with a black woman? That's why I tell brothers, don't be a Pullman Porter in a relationship, because too many black men fought, died, and sacrificed for you to be here, and for you to settle for less in a relationship than your grandfathers and your fathers got. That's just unacceptable. I mean, those men had to deal with that because of racism and Jim Crow from white people, but you shouldn't have to deal with that from your own black woman. Your black woman needs to treat you just like those other black women of previous generations did, because you are working hard to help her, and she should be working hard to help you. You should not be the Pullman Porter in a relationship, the guy who has to literally sit there and take a submissive position and take abuse from women, because you people worked hard to get you here, and you need to understand your value as a man, your worth as a man, and understand that you were not put here to be some Pullman Porter in a relationship or some garbage man who has to settle for less. You deserve the best out here, and you need to see your value and your worth and say to yourself, I deserve the best, and I do not need to take abuses from people who have the same perception of me as a racist or a white supremacist. A black woman who sees me in the same way as a racist and a white supremacist is not a woman you want to be with. And this is why brothers need to understand why they should not be the Pullman Porter in any relationship. Our fathers had to put up with white people's garbage, but we shouldn't have to put up with black women's garbage or her hostile treatment or her cruel treatment, because our fathers and great-fathers and great-grandfathers fought and sacrificed for us to have a better quality of life. And having a better quality of life means we raise the standard and we accept nothing less than a black woman's best. If you'd like to see me make more videos like this, you can donate to my Patreon by clicking the link in the description box. And if you want to try some of my SJS Direct publications, you may do so by clicking the link to Amazon.com. That's all I have to say for this video. You can comment, rate, and subscribe.